Thank you for being here. My name is Mark Forrest. I'm chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. We're excited to be in Eastham, and it's exciting to be here with our quorum, Commissioner Lyons and Commissioner Bergstrom. Before we get into the agenda, I have to just read some preliminary stuff here. So this meeting of the regional commissioners will be conducted in accordance with applicable laws. Members of the public are invited to attend in person or may view the meeting via a live broadcast on our Barnstable County YouTube channel or our website, capecod.gov. So our meeting is being called to order. What I'd like you to do is join us in a Pledge of Allegiance, and I need someone to point out where, I know we have flags in front of us, but it's right behind us. Okay, but please join us in a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'm going to ask everyone to join us in a moment of silence to reflect on the bravery and the sacrifices of all those who have put on their lives on the line in service to our country, protecting our safety, our freedom, and our democracy. Thank you. Before I get to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment, and for those who may want to speak, I'm going to direct folks to the podium. I'd just like to give at least just a brief explanation as to why we're here. The board made the decision last year that when we begin the new year, we'd like to get out on the road and really get engaged in more direct conversations with our local officials and come out to the towns and engage in a dialogue and a discussion so that we can better understand some of the issues that you're wrestling with and that you can tell us maybe where we can do a better job, where we can improve, the kinds of things that really you care about. So this is our third town, but we were snowed out of our last stop. So we were supposed to be in Barnstable for our last meeting. So the blizzard took care of that. So we just skipped over Barnstable. We'll deal with them later. And we're happy to be here in the town of Eastham. And what I'd like to do is acknowledge we have the presence of the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. And in a moment, I'm going to invite you both to come up and join us at the table so we can begin at least a conversation. And then you can stay with us while we go through at least the two initial presentations that we have for today. And I don't want to get too formal, so we should have a good conversation. So is there anybody here who would like to make a public comment or a statement? Well, that's pretty easy. I'm surprised being in Eastham that I don't have anybody. Really, this is a first. We should make a note of that in the record. All right, so the next item on our agenda is an update and a discussion with the town manager and members of the select board. And Jerry, come on up. Jackie, come on up. And I'm going to ask you for the record to state your full names, and I'll kick things off.
I'm having my back to.
I know.
Wow.
Want to have them.
We can sit
Yeah, let's
sideways.
You want to sit on the edge?
sure.
Yeah, would you prefer that?
Sorry.
I think so. No, I agree.
What's going to happen is once the presentation gets going, I'm going to ask you to flip your chairs around so
Yeah,
you can hang with us and watch the presentation.
I move over here.
No, you're good. You're good.
That's great. So,
I won't, I promise.
well, I can just say that it's a pleasant surprise to see Jackie here. I've known you and worked with you for a long time. And the town of Eastham is gonna face this huge loss with you retiring later on in June. So we're lucky to have you for the meeting here. We really appreciate all your hard work on this town.
Thank you.
And you've done a great job, and we're gonna miss you.
I'm
And
gonna miss you all too. I really am, sincerely.
I know, so we're lucky. This is one of, as you hit the home stretch, this is one of your last sort of
Yes.
opportunities to engage with us, and, we're gonna miss you.
And I bring Rich's regards. Rich Bienvenu is gonna be our new town manager. My last day is gonna be June 10th. He'll be starting then. I've had the great fortune, and so you, Mark, of working with Rich for the past 6 years, you've known him longer. He's gonna be phenomenal I think,
I
we're
agree.
hoping it's a
I
seamless
agree.
transition.
Well, we broke him in Yarmouth, and we gave him a lot to do.
Yes, we
and-
did.
And he was terrific. We were so sad to see him leave us, but he's coming to a good community, and, he'll do a great job.
He will. And you mentioned Jerry Saracel, he's the chairman of our select board. We also have Terry Gallagher, Eastham rep from the assembly, and Mary Nee, who's the chairman of our zoning task force. So a couple of other, and some staff, Shana Broken, and
That's great. And I understand we have members of the is it the climate change committee?
Collaborative, yeah.
That's great. So, we'll have a chance to have more of a conversation with you folks when we get to that agenda on
Right,
the item.
we will be talking
So,
climate.
in our travels around the towns, the message that we're hearing from most of our communities is how challenging it is financially.
yes.
All right, declines in state aid, changes at the federal level, it's all sort of trickling down to us. In virtually every community, we're seeing communities wrestling with overrides
Yes.
and trying to find ways to stretch a dollar. Isn't that a fairly safe statement? So I'm assuming Eastham will probably have an override. Can you give us sort of just a brief assessment of how things are going financially, how things are looking for the budget, and how you're surviving?
Well, I think overall, things are going well financially because we've planned ahead and we feel ready. However, Eastham is in the unfortunate position of playing catch up, where 10 years ago, we embarked on a $130 million water system, and last year we approved a $170 million wastewater system. So we're moving ahead quickly, but it is really challenging for taxpayers because we've added water and wastewater debt. Rich Bienvenu, as you know, is a brilliant finance person, and he's worked out our wastewater debt, so it should not be as painful as water, but that adds this level. This year, we are facing 3 overrides. One is a general override just to keep level services. And Eastham likes to do a level service budget as opposed to a percentage budget. We want to, if people have voted for services and they enjoy the services they have and they want to keep them, that's what we're funding.
Got it.
So we have a small override for that. We have a small override for the schools, mostly the elementary school, but I think a little bit of Nauset is in that
Yes,
too.
yes.
And then we have an override, a larger override for our 3-year union contracts with employees. And that's, we love our employees. They're phenomenal. We've obviously done an awful lot in the last 10 years. And they've been, we have to keep capacity in order to do those things.
Right.
But right now, the labor market in Outer Cape is especially challenging, as it is all over Cape Cod, but more so for us. And so those contracts are contracts. So we need to fund them through an override.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to point out is, for my fellow commissioners, is that there's been some discussions involving myself, Jackie, Rich, the county administrator, about how we can, as a region, do a better job in meeting some of the staffing needs on the Outer Cape and in the Lower Cape, particularly in this part of the world. This has been a fairly regular conversation with Rich Bienvenu about the need to find ways to collaborate, work together, particularly to support staffing. When I was in the manager's office in Provincetown back in the horse and buggy days, we were talking about sharing services for building inspectors. Right? We were talking about how can we share services for health inspection. The good thing was that we had the county to rely on for health inspection services. So if we needed help, if there was a loss in a position, if we were having trouble hiring somebody, the county was there to provide a backstop for that. So I know there are discussions that have been going on in this area, and, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing the pace of those pick up.
Yeah.
Did you want to jump in here, Jerry?
Yeah, I think it's important to look at working together with other towns in the sense it may not. You have the political issue if you wanted to combine police, fire, or whatever. This is East Hams and so forth. But if you work with a building inspector or health, or try and see if you can get anything that behind the scenes, not with a name in front of it. I think that's a way to start as we look at this. One of the things that, I mean, Jackie raised the issue of our employees and keeping the team together. But one of the things that happens out here is if you have a vacancy, you tend to be in competition with your neighbors for the same person. And that's a problem that we've, not just Eastham faces, but all of us on the Outer Cape face. And so anything we can do to try and work together on that, that helps. And one of the things that Jake talked about, the school override that we're going to have, a lot of our elementary school, I don't know if you know how it works. We have a regional school,
Yes.
basically above, from grade 6 up, and kind of a mixture on the elementary schools, but each town has its own. We really have been hit in Eastham with special needs costs, especially the cost of sending, we morally and legally have to educate them, but off the Cape is a significant increase. And I don't know if there's any way, and I'm sure that we're not the only town. And it may be this year we're really hit and another year we're not, but we may not be the only town. Is there any way to look at from a countywide, I view this should be the state, but from a countywide issue of any help looking at that kind of special needs program, because I think that hits. Eastham, it hits us hard, but I can't imagine that we're unique.
Not at all. Commissioner Bergstrom?
Yeah, when you anticipate some unexpected expenses that you can't deal with, the first thing you do is take out insurance, and insurance spreads the cost over a bunch of people. You may have special needs students more than you expected, but the next town over doesn't, and so on. So I absolutely agree with you. It's a broader issue that has to be dealt with by the towns. It should be dealt with by the state. It's unfair for a school committee or selectmen to come up with a budget, not knowing year to year what your expenses are going to be. You're under the constraints of Proposition 2.5. So I think it's long overdue that the state didn't take, some measures to control the cost of special needs students to the individual towns. And that for years, and I certainly agree that all students should be educated up to their abilities. But it's unfair that one town would get hit hard and the next town wouldn't. So as far as countywide goes, well, we can look at that, but it really is something the state should do.
Yeah.
Jackie,
And I
and then
get-
Commissioner Lyon.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to circle back to the regionalization issue
Mhm.
or, as Rich and I keep talking about it, shared services. Doesn't necessarily need to be a formal regional move, but shared services.
Yeah,
And I think we would welcome the county's leadership in that area, because I think you add more of a neutral tone to it, whereas sometimes when it's town to town trying to do it, the political overtones, as Jerry said, get too much.
I have firsthand experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Who's getting
Yeah,
more?
I-
Who's
I
getting more
can
than
tell
the
you
other?
some stories.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
no,
thank
that's a
you
good
for
point.
bringing that up.
No,
Commissioner Lyon.
just as far as the schools are concerned, I agree, and listening and participating in some of the regional meetings that we've been having, looking at the budget. I did, hear the superintendent, their school choice is a burden. It works in Boston. I mean, I'm not saying school choice is a bad thing, especially, we fund our schools wrong,
Yeah.
let's put it that way, but, it is, he's saying you have these schools, every one of them is pretty similar. They're good schools, they offer a lot, but this person works up here or, and they want their kid there, they can get closer to where they are, and it doesn't always work budget wise. So I agree, there should be another look at that. But I attended a Mass Works retreat this past week, and the the principal of Cape Cod Tech, Fenton, Mr. Fenton, I think that's his name, am I right?
Mhm.
He was saying how because I was there to talk about educating. I mean, we have these young people, how are we gonna keep what are the jobs? There is a lot of jobs in government and they
Yeah.
pay very, very well. And if you have an accounting degree or a building inspector or, DPW, whatever your passion is, even environmental services, why aren't we bringing this into the high schools, bringing it into and he said that he had just received a call from one of the fire departments saying that they needed administrative help. Is there people being educated in town administration? So I thought that, since he brought it up, I jumped right on it, but I do think there's a way. I mean, we have to get that word out, but we also have to get people to realize these are good professions.
Yeah.
And if we brought people, if high school started this, remember stenography and typing in high school and all. So if we brought if we brought these opportunities and then mentored these kids within our town, even right out of high school and help them along, there could be a way we could figure this out, I think.
Right.
But there should be on those low hanging fruit of inspectional services, health department, I'm with the town, I'm on the board of Wellfleet, and we just hired a health agent, but all of these people need to be brought up to snuff and what's happening, and you're always helpful. This town is always helpful with Wellfleet, but there are these challenges that we're all going through.
Ron?
Yeah, just in a way of regionalization. The county did a feasibility study on a organic waste, a composting facility at the base. I was just like, obviously, we always talked about the tipping fees, we always talked about how some of these landfills are being closed and you anticipate the expense will go up. And, it is estimated that 30% of the waste stream could be composted.
Right.
So if indeed this comes to fruition, that will save the town's money in the long run. Now, it's a big issue, but it's just one of the ways that I want you to be aware that we and the administrator are looking at how lower regionalization can lower the expenses.
Right.
I want to get back to your point, Jerry, about the education, special education. One of the things that we worked on before Michael Dutton came on as our administrator is we did a study on behavioral health services. All right, we received some funding, we were able to get a grant, we brought the towns together, we identified an area of need, and then we've helped facilitate efforts by the towns to secure funds to hire the appropriate personnel to help address that problem. I think that's one of many things that we can do in this topic. I think
That would be great.
if there can be an ongoing dialogue with the administrators to identify a service area, make sure that we're clear on what the need is. We may need to bring in some outside grant money or some expertise, focus on the need, understand some detail, have a consensus on what the needs are on a particular area, even as it relates to school related services, because the schools are getting hit hard, particularly in some of these special needs areas. You're looking at consistently communities having to hire. I mean, I'm amazed actually the growth in the expenditures and all of some of these special services that the towns need. There may be ways that we can creatively help provide support to that. We did it with, like I said, with behavioral health. I know that at the end result of all that, and after the studies were done, monies were raised, grant funds did come in, and we've found creative ways to put personnel, around the cave.
That would be excellent. The biggest expense on the special needs
Mhm.
side, single things, is when you have to transport a child off Cape to get the services that child needs, because there's not available on the
Yeah.
Cape. I don't know if you looked at it, is there a way to
Yeah,
you could cut down at least the transportation costs and the
And that-
time.
that's part
I
of
would-
the child,
child
that
to go
travel
across.
is
Yeah.
a lot of
Have you
time.
talked to the RTA? They do, I mean, it's something to look at in the future.
This is,
They have,
but
they have,
But-
but let me just suggest, this is usually the number one item on the gripe list with the state reps when they come in.
Yeah.
And the state
Okay.
senators, all right, I honestly think, because if you're following the debates on Beacon Hill right now, on Beacon Hill, this is exactly what they're talking. This issue is what they're getting, the reps and senators are getting hammered on. All right, is
Mhm.
special ed costs, transportation costs. If you look at the overall amount of aid, it's actually either level or going down in many of these categories.
That's right.
When our costs are going up significantly. So I'm happy to continue this work on it, but they need to hear about it loudly and clearly.
Mhm.
Because I just read a letter that was submitted to the legislative leadership. It was a letter organized by educators around the Commonwealth. I think there were like over 2,000 signatories demanding help. All right, this was directed to the leadership on Beacon Hill,
Mhm.
demanding help in precisely these areas.
Okay.
So you're not alone in this, with this complaint.
I didn't.
But I'm just letting you know that there's all the cannon fire has been aimed at Beacon Hill on it. And I think to some degree, maybe we can help aim some more fire
Right.
on Beacon Hill on that issue.
To just change something, just keep up your work. I know we're here with the climate action committee and
Mhm.
what the county has done to help us. Looking at those environmental things has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
It is, you've really helped Eastham move forward with both the expertise and with finances that help reduce our costs. So I wanted to say thanks on that.
Great.
And to follow up, I think Eastham has benefited in the last 10 years so much by a collaboration with the commission and how much work the commission has helped us with, just the support that we get for new ideas, for zoning changes, we've done a lot of work and the commission has been really such a helpful partner in that.
Mhm.
That definitely shout out
That's a
to that.
great segue.
That's terrific. Yeah. So is that, I think I'm getting the hint that we're segueing.
It's time to move.
It's time to move on
No,
to the
not
next.
necessarily, but
No.
we have,
No.
there's more to come. on
First
that.
of all, I appreciate your comments about the
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah.
I think one of I used to serve on the former Cape Cod Planning and Economic Development Commission, which gives you an idea of how old like I said, there was some buggy
I don't
days.
even know what that is. No, go ahead.
Of course, you read about it in the books. But when it was exclusively a regional planning agency, it didn't have the sort of the regulatory arm that sometimes people struggle with. All right, that's the part of the commission where you're saying no, or
Right.
you can't, or, right? And so back in those days, it was always coming up with studies, doing reports, doing all the good things. All right, now I'm not suggesting they do a lot of good things, but sometimes we tend to focus on the regulatory side, but there are a lot of other good things that are
They're
being
great
done there.
technical support.
And I think this is a good
Amazing.
segue to ask Christie to come up and let's see if we can begin our presentations with the commission. So come on up, Christie, and I'm gonna let you decide when to bring up Steve and how you want to proceed, but come on up.
Should we go?
No, stick
you can
around.
Stay.
Stick around.
Yeah, join us. For as long as you can, if you'd like,
My main job this year
as
on
well.
the select board was to try and find a replacement for Jackie. We're gonna miss
Well, we
her.
know there is no replacement.
There's no replacement.
Exactly, we can make a motion to that, okay, fellow commissioner?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Great, good morning. Is this an okay place to stand?
Yes.
All right, great, perfect. So, as you already introduced, Mark, I'm Christy Senator, I'm the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. This is a great opportunity to talk about our collaborations with Eastham, and we're really pleased to be here this morning, not only to talk about our climate action planning work, but also some water quality efforts that have been ongoing in the Eastham. So, as many of you know, a few years back, we completed the first ever climate action plan for our region. This included a number of key recommendations to address climate adaptation, mitigation, And it also included providing a number of resources and technical support that can be applied locally to address adaptation and mitigation. So we are, as I mentioned, very pleased to be working collaboratively with the town of Eastham to really develop a draft climate action plan for the town. We have also developed several resources for our communities to use. This is including a municipal action toolkit. This provides model bylaws, strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and guidance for local implementation. We have a coastal planner, our Cape Cod Coastal Planner tool, which is another resource. This is the mapping application, decision support tool that is really used to visualize coastal hazards. It can help us to assess vulnerable infrastructure and evaluate some of those adaptation strategies. We've also developed a model coastal resilience bylaw. We've updated wetlands regulations for flood protection, and these are part of some of those more regulatory tools that we've developed. And so along with our multi-hazard mitigation planning, technical assistance that we provide to our communities, we're also looking to expand our planning work into other disaster resiliency planning. So we know the intensity and the frequency of significant storms and climate-related events that we're seeing is only increasing, and our region is incredibly vulnerable. So we're very pleased to see the town of Eastham leading the way on a lot of these local climate action planning efforts. We have some other towns across the region moving in a similar direction, and we're hoping to see all of our towns across the region taking this initiative over the course of the coming months and years. So I want to thank not only the town of Eastham, but all of the stakeholders that have been engaged in this work. And then our team at the commission who've spent an incredible amount of time really working to make sure that our resources and technical support are used in the right way. So with that, I'd like to thank Steve Tupper, who's our deputy director at the commission, who's really been taking the lead on this project. And he has a number of slides to share so we can talk in more depth about the work that we've been doing here, and happy to answer questions after that.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, Christy, for the introduction, and thank you for the welcome to be able to join today and talk about this project we've been doing about a year now. I'm very happy to be sharing it with this group. So I'll kick it off from where Christy left off in terms of the regional plan. When we put out the regional plan, we knew it put a lot of work on the shoulders of the towns. So we've been working in a number of different projects since the release of this plan, working on specific initiatives. But we're very happy when the town of Eastham administration reached out and asked for some support specifically on developing a local climate action plan. It aligned with some available resources and the desire to think about resources for all 15 towns. So really thought of this as a great opportunity to pilot some work in Eastham. So I'll give a little walkthrough on what we've been doing in the development of the plan, share some of the contents of the draft plan. And did want to highlight, we will next be presenting this to the Eastham Select Board before it goes final. So what we're presenting today is draft, and we'll still certainly work with the Select Board on those details, but happy to come here for the update at this point. So I did want to highlight the fact that there was a lot going on. First, I'll jump into why develop a climate action plan. So certainly I want to be clear that we don't feel like every town needs to develop exactly what we're presenting today. What we developed for Eastham was what Eastham asked for. This well into other planning efforts, and they felt like this was an important tool to be able to strategically think about climate investments. There's great discussion this morning about the lack of funding across the board. So it's really important to be strategic in the climate space, and this plan will help do that. And also, one of the other things to highlight here, to help go after additional resources at the state and federal level. Certainly availability of funding ebbs and flows, but I would say across the board, if there's a demonstrated activity to get consensus in the community and a really clear objective in a plan, it always helps when we're going after those resources. And particularly when communities can come together and make shared asks for resources. So on the slide here, you see a few other things that are important here. I'll touch a little bit on communication and coordination as we get forward, but did want to highlight that this will be an important tool in the context of all the other great planning work going along in the town of Eastham. So I want to talk a little bit about the process of developing the plan, and here highlight some of the underlying resources that fed into this process. So on the left-hand side were some of the things that the commission had developed. These were resources we used to support the development of this Eastham Climate Action Plan. On the right, I wanted to highlight that there's a lot of specific work done in Eastham leading up. There was a greenhouse gas inventory that we supported the town on developing. There was a climate action survey that occurred before the start of this plan, and we were able to tie this very specifically into the strategic plan for Eastham. For able to think about how resources would be associated with this plan on the back end, and a number of other related planning activities as well. I want to show those in a timeline to be clear that there's been a lot going on in Eastham in the climate space for a number of years. So on the slide here, are a couple of key dates along the time frame here, going back more than 15 years in terms of specific plans and actions taken by the town of Eastham in terms of climate action. These are all getting towards some goals in terms of improving resiliency for the community in very specific ways. So I just want to be clear that this effort builds on all of those things. So we're coming in with the knowledge that there have been a lot of great resiliency planning activities. There's a look at low-lying roads. There have been specific actions like a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. So these things are all things that fed into the climate action planning process. We're able to be used as context to develop this more wide-ranging climate plan. So how did we go about developing this plan? So I talked about initially is really that first phase. I want to take stock of everything that had been done already. Again, a lot of great resources going into it. What we really spent most of the staff time on this was that second phase, gathering new information, having communications with all municipal departments that touch this topic, and a lot of community engagement that I'll talk on later. And really the hardest part of any of these planning processes is pulling that all together. Plan, you'll see a relatively tight plan, presenting a whole host of information that we collected throughout that process, really trying to boil it down to something more actionable. To give you a sense of the time it takes for a plan of this, so we kicked off roughly a year ago with a staff kickoff actually in this room. Had great representation from administration down through departments, including the select board chair who was there at that kickoff meeting. So I really saw a lot of great support from the town on that kickoff. And that really kicked off the town side of those conversations. We had direct municipal interviews with all of the staff that would interact with climate one way or another. Launched into community engagement. I'll talk about in more detail. And then it took time to develop the plan. We, with the town, released the draft plan earlier this calendar year. It was out for a 30-day public comment period. Again, we'll be going to the select board with that draft plan for them to review along with the public comments before finalizing the plan. So roughly 1 year time frame. This is a fairly in-depth planning activity. Do want to spend most of the time talking about community engagement. Again, that was a focus because it was important as we understood from town staff and relevant committees that I'll touch on in a little bit. So certainly a lot of time with those municipal interviews. I think that there are some departments that everyone obviously associates with climate, those frontline departments that are dealing with the disasters related to climate, emergency services, DPW, but really we talked to many different departments. I also want to highlight many committees in town that somehow interact with it. So each of the committees, whether it be related to zoning, whether it be conservation, whether it be planning, they all certainly have a role in implementing a plan. So we have direct conversations with each of those committees and town departments. We also expanded the tent to talk with others that were interested in the topic, including the schools. We worked both with the high school Green Club, had a great conversation with them, had a lot of creative ideas. We did a specific project with the middle school on this. They had some interesting ideas as well. It's really great to see the different ideas as you get to different age groups. And so I appreciate the support of both of those schools in this, and also found other opportunities for conversations as well. I'll touch on the focus groups a little bit here. There are some groups that we know are tough to get out to public meetings and pop-ups. We made some dedicated efforts to reach those groups. One I'll highlight in particular is a business focus group. We know they're really important in all communities, but certainly in Eastham, we want to make sure we reached out to them. We're able to find a business that was able actually to host that focus group and work with a business network to bring together that group. Really some interesting perspectives, and really they wanted to understand if there's anything done on the town side, how does it affect the businesses. I wanted to make sure they are part of that conversation. So I really enjoyed that conversation. I'll touch on pop-ups and workshops in a minute with some pictures. I think that's the best way to explain those. And then on the right-hand side are just some of the other things that typically go along with this. We have a project website, so certainly everything that I'm presenting there is up on the website, so anyone can take a look. And we worked with the town to make sure that it integrated with media that they were putting out, newsletters and those sort of things. These are always my favorite slides. So I want to show some pictures of what we were doing. So I'll just walk through some of the types of activities we did. One would be pop-ups. So certainly we want to be able to interact with people where they were, not having them necessarily come out to a meeting. So on the top left, I want to highlight one being at the farmers market. And this was an important collaboration with the Energy and Climate Action Committee. I'll talk about them a few times because they're really instrumental throughout this process. but specifically, they were a force for us in the pop-ups. As staff, we can only be in so many places and only dedicate so many hours, but there's really dedicated volunteers. They were able to spread that outreach quite a bit, and we're manning stations like the farmers market. We took shifts at the swap shop because apparently that's a hub in Eastham, and we certainly experienced that. We got a lot of great input from pop-ups like that, as well as at the beach, and that windmill weekend. Really an interesting crowd there. That was a great one. I was able to do. It was a great one. And then community workshop, certainly another cornerstone of this sort of activity. We had great turnout, both in person and virtual workshops held here and also at the public library. Library, again, being a great partner here as well. Had a great turnout. Had a lot of conversations throughout the process that really shaped the recommendations in the plan. Wanted to share directly some of the things we were hearing when we were out and about. So certainly people had very specific interests. So we heard folks interested in solar panels, folks with questions on EVs, but then a lot of just bigger picture questions as well, and bigger picture sentiments about making sure that the town collectively was doing everything they could to think about climate as they're making investment decisions or as they're kind of tracking the future of the town. So a couple of things to highlight here. The one on the bottom left, you can probably guess, came from one of the school conversations. Students saying they'd rather learn about climate change in school than math. I would argue you kind of need to understand both, but appreciate that they're really passionate about climate change. And again, had some really great ideas. Some of the conversations were really technical, some weren't. On the top right there, someone acknowledging that their pond near their house was sunk. That's how they were feeling the interaction with this. So just wanted to acknowledge that people come at from different angles, and certainly that's not a wholly climate issue. We just wanted to highlight that was part of it. And then just an appreciation, whether it be for staff or the volunteers that are out there, people just were appreciated being heard. So I think that's an important element of this process as well, community dialogue. I'll highlight very briefly some of the plan elements. I will say it's up on the project website. There's also an executive summary, so 6 pages of all the key things in this plan if someone wants a quick view of it. One thing I did want to highlight is another thing we put effort into is making this plan look good. I know that's not always the most important, but if you want someone to read and engage with the plan, we did put a good amount of effort in making sure that it was visually interesting to get people to engage with the document. So you'll see consistent visuals throughout the document. One other thing that we thought was important, I'll say this came directly from the recommendation of the Energy and Climate Action Committee, was a reader's guide. So this is really written in a way to engage an individual reader, to say, here's the things that you should think about in this plan. Here are things that as an individual you can do for climate action. So this is a little bit of a twist from a lot of the climate plans we saw, and I found it a really engaging part of the plan. We talked a lot about, and we set the context for the local climate planning. I did want to highlight that this really involved a lot of coordination with town staff. Shana Brogan was the lead on town staff, and she really shepherded us through this process. And was successful in engaging all the different departments to make sure that their feedback was brought into that. And as we get into the specific recommendations, they were talking with the department that would be the one to implement these things to make sure it made sense operationally for them. The bulk of the plan, as you get through there, is the key findings and recommendations. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And then there's a discussion about how a plan like this would be implemented as well. So within the plan, there are approximately 56 strategies. So I will not walk through those today, but just wanted to highlight one on the slide here to give you a sense of the type of information. So the strategies are broken out in the categories of building, energy, natural resources, transportation, and community. And on the slide here, just an example from the natural resources. So for each of the strategies in the description, there's specific actions that could be taken to advance that strategy, and talks about the people that would be involved, the types of benefits and equity considerations, how to measure progress. So a lot of information to help move things forward. One thing I want to highlight here is these are not all things that the town would advance. There are certainly other partners locally and across the region that can move these forward, so those are identified. I will also highlight these don't all cost money. So certainly some of them do, but some of them are more operational and functional changes that can be worked into existing processes and plans. So I want to be clear about where some things would be new and would take money, and where some things would take other approaches to advance them. If someone were really concerned about the funding implications, we have tables as well, where you can start to kind of visually look at the things and look at the different strategies in terms of what they would cost, how easy they would implement. If someone else was more concerned with really maximizing greenhouse gas emissions benefits, you can look in that. So this is just a matrix to start to organize some of the strategies and then help towards that prioritization. This is not a prescriptive plan. It doesn't tell the town what to do, but it gives the town the tools to be able to prioritize and move towards implementation. So really the focus was, how can we as technical experts put out that information in a way that's consumable by the town and put them in the best position to advance these initiatives? It doesn't tell the town what to do, but it gives them the resources to help prioritize these decisions locally. And we certainly know that this is a long-term plan, as with all these climate plans. So we also provided information about the different performance measures that could be tracked to understand whether or not this plan is being successful. I will say this was done very intentionally to align with the regional plan. Many of these things are things that we are tracking already. So we stand as a partner with the town in terms of tracking climate action. And this was just to give a sense of what some of those metrics were. But certainly this is something we would be engaging with the towns on in the future in terms of how to track progress. We did want to close, so we have time for questions here to highlight next steps. I'd already highlighted, we were going to select board next, and then leading to the preparation of the final plan. And we'll be presenting them both with all the public comments and the edits we would suggest based on those public comments. We did get a lot of robust public feedback in the comments and some very direct feedback from the Energy and Climate Action Committee. So on the slide here is a clip of the letter that is included in the plan, helps present the context from the perspective of the committee in that plan, understanding that they would be an important element in terms of plan implementation. And then to tie back to where we started, this was really a pilot, and it took a lot of staff effort because in parallel, we're using this to develop resources that would be potentially applicable to all 15 towns. Actually, we've heard from towns outside of the Cape as well that are interested in what we're doing here. And we had actually a representation from a few other Cape towns following this process along the way. So while it's not ready for prime time yet, we have a number of tools that we will be sharing to support towns as they work towards climate action plan or continue to work on it. So that's certainly time to answer any questions.
Commissioner Lyons.
Thank you. First of all, I thought it was really interesting that one of the comments of your sort of survey was, I'd rather study climate change than math. If you do need a little math, but grab that kid. But anyway, there's a future employee. But anyway, so are the climate action committees working with the other town? You were saying that there's other towns involved. Are they the outer Cape towns? Because we all know these are man-made lines here, but we're all sort of sharing this portion of the Cape, which is mostly sand dune and
Maybe what we can
natural
do, if
stuff.
it's okay with you, Steve, is maybe we can invite members of the
If they have
the
anything
Energy
they
and Climate
want.
Action Plan Committee to come up. Would you like, I think let's spend a little bit of time in engaging them in this conversation. Come on up and feel free to sit at the table and join us.
They can sit
Yeah,
here.
you can come right up here with us. Is there anybody else on your committee?
Tom McNellis.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom.
East Tim.
Yeah.
And a big thanks to the commission. It was, their guiding light in terms of working us through the process and keeping us well grounded in science and in really the way a community can address this without overreaching is really important. So in terms of your question on regional, absolutely. We are, and again, the commission is helping, Cape Light Compact is helping. There's a couple other groups that are helping us expand because you can't do it alone.
Right.
It's,
Exactly.
yeah, the boundary, the environment doesn't stop at the boundaries.
Right.
And so there's a pretty robust Outer Cape climate group. There's a widening group amongst the entire area of the Cape where folks are looking at, how to combine resources, how to combine ideas, and how to combine, volunteer activities and passion.
Yeah, I want to follow up on Commissioner Lyons's comment. The public engagement, that seemed to be quite heavy. I mean, it
Right.
seemed like you developed some techniques, some tools, some approaches to get all sorts of different segments of the community involved. Can you comment on that? Is that?
Sure, and we have done a lot prior to this, in terms of, and with very good reception by, both Eastham and surrounding towns that come to some of our events. But I would say the commission expanded that significantly with some very interesting and very engaging ways to bring and reach hard to reach populations.
How about the pop-up presentations? What comment on those and how effective those were?
it's meeting people where they are.
Mhm.
And the farmer's market was fabulous. People just kind of came through and talked
Yeah.
in the weekend. We do that, the beaches. One of my favorite stories was at a pop-up down at First Encounter Beach. And this little kid comes in with his parents and he could barely see above the table. And the commission was great. You know, they adapt, you know, the professionals there know how to adapt to, you know, the audience. And they're like, oh, you know, what do you think of keeping the beach usable? What are you worried about in terms of your ability to use the beaches? And the kid goes, blue crabs. And we're like, oh, and I learned something. He goes, blue crabs are invasive. And he went on, you know.
How old
for
was this
minutes.
kid?
Yeah, about 5 years old.
Oh my God.
Something like that, about 5 years old. Yeah. And, yeah, he was very passionate about it and he knew all about blue crabs. It's very impressive.
That's very.
5-year-old.
And
How did the business, I'm wondering, what was the interaction with the business community? How did they recognize that they have a role and how they could participate? Or was it just about what is going to impact us?
Well, I think, Steve, you probably have direct.
Sure.
I wasn't at that particular meeting.
I have to speak to the business. I did want to add one other thing to the outreach as well. I did want to acknowledge a lot of the resources we are doing for Eastham. We are making more generalized versions. So if there's some of those activities were successful, we'll have a whole playbook of how other communities can do that sort of engagement. But to answer your specific business question, it was actually Cape Associates that was kind enough to be able to host us through their network and through again, a number of businesses there. I will say there's a diversity of opinions among that community as with all. But I will say there was a general acknowledgement that Eastham is changing and the climate is something we need to think about in the future. So I think there was a general consensus that action is appropriate, but they were really interested on the specifics. So if there was some sort of ban on a specific plastic product, they wanted an acknowledgement that it means different things to different businesses. It means something different to a local business versus a large corporate entity. The change is different among those. So really what I got out of the conversation is they wanted to be part of those detailed conversations when there's any change like that, and they wanted to help shape the changes. They were generally supportive of climate action as long as they could think about it as being partners in that change rather than being something to push on them.
one of the questions I have is that oftentimes in the past, when we've done a study at the county level, sometimes it's perceived as county experts coming in and dropping a whole laundry list of ideas and solutions for a local community. But what's different about this is it looks like there was the active engagement of the community. This was not some group of experts sort of landing in your community, but actually an interactive engagement where the community was actively involved in the conversation, identifying issues, identifying problems, and figuring out ways to work together to identify solutions. Is that a fair observation?
I would certainly say you're directly on. I mean, we very much wanted to make this a ground up engagement, not something coming down from Beacon Hill. And I think regionally, you know, the value of folks here who are in the region and in Barnstable, we all, as you said, experience similar issues. And so we're in this boat together, we're on the sand spit together. But even then, there's important desires and differences between the different cities and towns. And so that's where this process really helped, I think, because it's really a foundational, you know, this is what's important to Eastham residents and businesses and municipality. That is baked into this.
So you don't look at this as a Cape Cod Commission plan for Eastham, you look at this as Eastham's plan.
It's an Eastham plan, but it's informed by, you know,
All the expertise that's Brown and Robbins.
exactly best practices, the science, the importance of.
No, that becomes very evident. I just wanted you to sort of help
Absolutely.
confirm or deny that the way that's coming across. No, I'm very,
Very impressed. This is
Yeah.
very good.
Commissioner Bergstrom?
Yeah, that's- Hi, I'm here too,
Okay, I'm sorry.
okay?
Mhm.
You know, this is all well and good, but in my experience with similar initiatives, at some point, the leaders have to come up with solutions. In other words, you can reach out to the community, you can cover all your bases, you can talk to business community, you can talk to environmental, but you know, if you go to the Congress, nobody ever gets up in front of the Congress and says, let's talk about this today. They put something on the table. They said, we professionals, the commission, businesses, they say, we have looked at this and we think that this is what you should do. And you'll get, as you said, Steve, you'll get a lot of people complain, so how come you didn't ask us first? And the reason is because what you recommend becomes the basis of the discussion. Otherwise, it becomes so diffuse that you'll get half the people at the end of the day will be unhappy because they didn't listen to them. So we know what the problems are, at least we can identify them. And you're bringing people into the process, but somebody has to stand up and say, this is where we're gonna go. This is what we're gonna do. And I'm sure you have a good, a good background here, and you have the committee and you have somebody else. But ultimately, the way you come to consensus is to offer solutions well thought out, backed up by scientific evidence, and say, this is what we're gonna do. And at the end of the day, 49% of the people will not agree with that, but that's how it works. And this is my personal experience. It's not to be good. I'm on the commission, by the way. I'm the commissioner's appointment to the commission. So anyway, this is a tremendous resource. I know Eastham is under the gun. I've seen the pictures of people standing on top of the bluff, looking down. We have a dredge that can nourish beaches, but it doesn't work with high bluffs like that, so. And also, just giving recommendations to what individuals can do to mitigate the cost, mitigate the effects of climate change. I have solar panels on my house, we recycle, talking about plastics, talking about, dealing with, I would like to see, for instance, one suggestion is an area view of Cape Cod, mapping out the green space we have, even areas that are residential, how many trees we have and so on, and try to say, look, we're going to try to maintain the same level of green space versus developed space in the future. So there's a lot of things you can do. So as much as I appreciate this, I'm waiting somebody to put a stake in the ground and say, Miss, this is what the issue is. This is what we're going to do about it.
Thanks, Commissioner. I will say you got to start somewhere. You need to do this kind of work.
Oh, yeah.
Because the leadership will emerge once you have the community sort of rallying around it. I'd like to get some of the local officials. Jerry, you've sat through this. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's been brought before the select board quite a few times, and we've actually put in a policy on the town.
Yeah.
For example, on vehicles. Here's a policy,
So you're already starting to implement. You're already starting. So you're not waiting for the plan to get
We're
finished.
not waiting for the plan. And the climate action committee
There you go.
brought it before us. There are options, you can't find an electric bulldozer, so you buy one,
Okay.
but where you can do it. So we've already started to implement some of those
That's great.
procedures in our staff.
Kudos to you. Jackie, did you want
I know that you have a really long meeting
to?
ahead.
No, I've got 3 more minutes.
I
So
feel
I'm
totally
gonna give you
remiss
one, then I'm gonna give
sitting in
Mary
the
me.
row is Shayna Brogan. She's our
Shayna,
special projects. and
could you stand up,
procurement
please?
director.
Can you stand up, please?
And I think, I'm sorry, Shayna, but one of the hallmarks of East Ham, I think, is that we have been able to not put these plans on shelves. And that's why I think that Energy and Climate Action Committee is gonna be particularly good at leadership. But Shayna has been responsible over my tenure here for the harbor planning process, the low-lying roads
Mhm.
process. She stewarded all of our major environmental projects and studies, including writing the grants to get them. So I just didn't want her to fade
No,
into the
thank you.
background.
Thanks for
Because I know
acknowledging.
the committee also appreciates her work.
No, that's great. Thank you. Mary, did you want to say something?
Sure. I chair the zoning task force and we're absolutely thrilled with it to have a plan like this
Yeah.
because we always take the position, the town adopts plans and visions. And then we come in and look at the regulatory supports that need to be in place. So the one thing I would say is having read this and having attended the community meeting, I was delighted and very concerned at the level of scientific information that was presented, in particular around the vulnerable coasts and those vulnerable areas. And so this is more of an appeal for future help, because if this plan is adopted and then this would go over to the zoning task force to look at it,
Yeah.
you've presented scientifically some really concerning issues. And Jerry mentioned politics. So you're taking coastal properties
Right.
that we're anticipating are going to be very, subject to falling in the ocean. And the remedies are really difficult. Prohibitions against
Right.
new constructions, managed retreat, limitations. I mean, there is a huge amount of issues. So I think it's important. We want to look at it,
Mhm,
but I will say that when we get to some of those really big issues,
mhm.
there's going to be a need for much more technical support to help us.
Right.
I think we're here to sort of reaffirm our commitment to provide that kind of support going forward. The discussion of retreat, how we manage that, how we finance that, how we help homeowners. I mean, the reality is we're not gonna stop erosion here. Mother Nature's
Yeah.
much more powerful on that score. But we have to deal with it. And it's not easy. When I worked for Congressman Studs, we had to relocate 2 lighthouses on the Outer Cape. And I spent a lot of time here on the Nauset Light as well as the Highland Light in Truro. And it might look easy to the sidewalk engineer, but these are incredibly complicated projects.
And going back to your earlier discussion about town finances, we've got 97% of our revenues coming from property taxes.
Mhm.
And we're literally talking about the properties that produce the most tax revenue in the town.
Right.
It's just a very difficult issue.
Understood.
Getting this up in a plan is a great first step, but there's gonna be a lot of work
Okay,
to actually realize this. That's it.
we're there. That was an excellent presentation, Steve.
It
Thank you
was.
very much.
Thank you.
We're gonna move
And
on to
thank
the
you
next,
for all the work
the next agenda
everyone's
item.
doing.
And I'm gonna turn this back over to Christie to kick us off onto the next item on our agenda. And
Water.
this is another hot topic, the drought, water, and water resources. And Christie.
Perfect, great. Well, before Tim Passacarnis gets underway, I just wanted to preface his remarks with a few opening remarks, just that aquifer protection planning and water quality have been priorities of the commission for decades. And as you know, we've spent a significant amount of time looking at addressing coastal water quality, more recently with our ponds and lakes and our freshwater quality. But water supply, aquifer protection planning are critical, and especially on the lower and outer Cape. And these are incredibly important issues. And our regional policy plan that was just completed and adopted at the end of 2025 has a number of recommendations within that plan. And one of those really under the natural system section is really advancing aquifer protection planning. So we're moving forward with these initiatives and certainly appreciate the invitation to be here today to present some of the data and information. Our natural resources team and specifically our water resources team are spending a number of hours really addressing these challenges. And so I'm pleased to recognize Tim Passacarnis, one of our water resources analysts, who will walk through really reviewing the data with you and reviewing what these conditions mean and where we can go from here. So hopefully Tim's got his presentation queued up and we can go from there. And then again, happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Christie. Tim?
All right, thank you, Christie. Commissioners, for the record, I'm Tim Passacarnis, Water Resources Analyst at the Commission. I'm
Here we
sharing
go.
this presentation right now, and give me just a second for Teams to come back. Okay, so this is a topic that certainly the commissioners will, are familiar with. I've presented on it several times. Unfortunately, I keep having to come back and present on it because they are conditions that either keep showing up or persist. So I will start with just an update or, really an attempt to provide some context to what I'm sure everyone is already aware of, which is the current drought declaration for the Cape Cod region, which is a level 2 significant drought. And I wanted to start with a little bit of a zoom out, which is to say that this is not a Cape Cod specific, topic of interest. This is happening throughout the state, that these conditions are, in some cases, like the Northeast and Central regions, they're actually worse than how Cape Cod is faring right now. So it's a topic of great interest at the state level, at the secretary's level. While I have this map up, I just wanted to point out a couple of pieces of information again to make sure that I'm being very clear about the data I'm presenting, which has sort of a specific time component to it just because of the way that the Drought Management Task Force and data reporting works. So this drought status map is effective as of February 1st. This was a declaration that you'll see at the bottom was made on March 9th. So typically the Drought Management Task Force meets monthly, and at those monthly meetings, they are looking at kind of the previous month's data. So this was a March declaration based on February data. So most of what I will present is going to, cover the information we had sort of at the end of the month of February. I'll also note that, and it may be of interest, particularly given the location of today's meeting, there are 7 drought regions under the state's drought management plan. And you'll see those are sort of broken out by the black borders. Typically, drought declarations are made at those drought region levels. However, there is precedent, and actually you can see right now that where there are significantly different conditions within a drought region, the task force has in the past and currently in the islands region may make different declarations for subregions, or in the case of the islands, separate for Martha's Vineyard from Nantucket. So in the case of the Cape Cod region right now, conditions are fairly uniform. So the whole region has that level 2 drought declaration. But in the past, there have been more specific call outs for when particularly precipitation conditions, which we know can vary wildly, right, from the Upper Cape, say, to the tip of Provincetown. So that is something that is considered, but right now the conditions are uniform enough that level 2 applies throughout the entire Cape Cod drought region. In the past, I've dived into a lot more detail about how these drought declarations are, sort of the information that goes into them in the process. So I just wanted to, because we are in, we're in sort of still the winter phase of drought declarations, just to point out kind of what fed into that level 2, or the continuation of a level 2 declaration. So the task force looks at a number of different indices. So they're looking at precipitation, and that's usually a look back of anywhere from 3 to, at this point, 12 months. And that sort of depends on how long drought conditions have persisted. So right now we're looking at the precipitation over the last 12 months and how that compares to a statistically normal amount of precipitation for the region. They're also looking at stream flow. So there are 2 stream flow, 2 gauges on streams at the Herring River in Harwich and the Quashnat River in Mashpee. But most, the most information comes from groundwater wells. So there are a lot of groundwater monitoring points. We all know that given the sandy soil on Cape Cod, we can get a lot more information about the aquifer from groundwater wells, maybe as compared to other regions. And then there's one lake and impoundment station at Ashumet Pond as well. And just to show that, they're not all of these indices are not saying the same thing, right? So if you look at the shading, the precipitation is maybe better than the others. It's only based on percentile would indicate a level 1 drought, while stream flow and lakes and impoundments, are more severe, kind of right on the edge of level 3. You can kind of see with the stream flow, groundwater, and lakes and impoundments where that line is between level 2 and level 3. It's right between the 10th and 11th percentile. And all of those are weighed together by the task force to come to an overall drought recommendation. One other thing that I want to point out, and this is included in the announcement about these latest drought declarations, right, is I'm sure still on everyone's mind. There was a lot of precipitation the final week of February. And at the time of this meeting, all of that was still pretty much as, it was still, the ground was still frozen, the snow was still on the ground. So none of that precipitation shows up in the numbers that I'm showing you. We will get a better sense of what that all means at the next drought task force meeting, which is in 2 weeks. I'm very curious about that. I'm sure others are as well, but I just wanted to point that out because I'm sure it's on everyone's mind, how all of that snow and precipitation that has fallen since then factors in.
Kim, can you just, Commissioner Lyons has a quick question about this slide.
So
Sure.
on these numbers, I see the shading, but the numbers, what does that mean? Precipitation? Is that 30 inches or is that a grade?
Yeah, it's a great
Yes,
question. Great question. I should have mentioned. So these are all percentiles. So these are based on historical records, and the percentiles actually it is based on the historical record for the month. So this is looking at the, for instance, the distribution of stream flow measurements that have been measured in February for those 2 stream flow locations for, I think most of these, in order to be used, they have to have at least 10 years of data. A lot of these stations have anywhere from, upwards of 30 years of data. Some of the groundwater wells have over 50 years of data, which is an excellent point, because when we move to kind of the March data, we could have sort of improving conditions. Like we could have groundwater levels that are rising, increased stream flow, and yet those may not change in terms of the percentile, right? Because as we typically get into the spring, that tends to be a wetter time of year. And so you can have more precipitation, more stream flow, but if it's not increasing more than normal, it doesn't improve those percentiles, and it sort of doesn't improve your relative, your relative conditions. And so that's one of the many nuances to the messaging about this that can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Lyons, are you?
No, the reason I bring this up is that everybody thinks that things are, okay, and you have a rainy month and, that's going to take care of things. And we're drawing from that, and there's more of us drawing from the well. But, we have history books in the county, and one is the history of Barnstable County from 1685 to 1885. It was the 300th anniversary, and they gave a snapshot. In Wellfleet in Eastham, I took a snapshot of this out of the book, but in 1985, the annual precipitation over 48 days over 120 days was 48 inches. And the average snowfall was 37 inches over 17 days. So that goes to climate change as well. And we have to always keep in mind that this is only in 50 years, the changes that we can see. I mean, that's within my lifetime, most people here in their lifetime. And so we have to really be conscious that this is a changing climate, and it is impacting our water resources. So I just wanted to put that out there of how rapidly it has changed.
Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, I know this may be subject for a future slide, but could you go over the challenge that we face as we go into a drought, particularly with groundwater? Are we seeing a situation where the water table will go low, that they would not be able to recharge the wells in the summer when there's peak demand? So what is the ultimate challenge we're facing if this drought continues and the groundwater levels are reduced?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I will keep going, because we will get to that later in the presentation. But yes, that is an excellent question, and the one that I think everyone is most interested in is less so, or in addition to sort of where things are at, is what what can be done about it and what does it mean. So very quickly, just to sort of, again, reorient ourselves, right? So we had a nice run in 2023, lots of precipitation. We were in normal conditions for about a year and a half until the fall of 2024, when a level 1 drought was declared. Again, sort of dry conditions, a dry winter led to that, going to level 2 drought at the beginning of 2025. Had a very wet spring, 2 inches above normal precipitation, led to a brief, drawing back to a level 1 in June, but then that quickly was changed to level 2 in July of 2025. And again, I'm sure everyone remembers from last summer that it felt like, at least when people wanted to be outside, there was a lot of rain, like every weekend for 12 or 13 weekends or whatever the final tally was. And that's, again, this sort of challenge that it can feel like there is a lot of rain and a lot of precipitation. But as Commissioner Lyons pointed out, a lot of rain historically was normal. And so to get out of a drought condition, you not only need that normal level of precipitation, you actually need to be above normal. And so, moving into the summer where we had sort of a double whammy of both higher than average temperatures and lower than average precipitation, basically, has led to the persistence of these conditions, so that even with a sort of normal level of precipitation throughout the fall, when we expect to have more rainfall to kind of recharge the aquifer, increase those groundwater levels, it hasn't been enough above normal to really push conditions out of those level 2 drought, where the indices would point towards it being level 2. And of course, everyone wants to know, right, so like, what does the future hold? If I had concrete answers, I'd have a great business on my hands there. But we do, with the task force, we look to the National Weather Service as part of their presentation every month. They give us these sort of outlooks. And this is for the next month, so the month of April. You'll see for basically the entire New England region, equal chances of above or below average, both temperature and precipitation. They also do seasonal outlooks that look 3 months ahead. They look very similar to this. So, depending on how you look at it, it's good that it does not say chances are well below normal for precipitation or chances of higher than normal temperatures are likely. But it's hard to say, what that means in terms of precipitation, especially given that we've seen, sort of the vagaries of individual storms, and they may track up kind of the Atlantic coast, and then some of them veer south and they only hit Martha's Vineyard. Some of them veer north and they hit, Vermont, and Cape Cod or Massachusetts as a whole can miss these individual storms. So it's hard to predict, but that is the outlook that we have, for the short term. Okay, so getting into the questions about, we're in a level 2 drought, what are some recommendations? What are things that can be done? These are, so this came from EEA. They have some, some guidance for both residents and businesses. And this gets, I think this gets to a couple of the questions, which is correctly pointed out that we are in a level 2 drought and we are heading into this summer, which is the season of highest demand, both in terms of simply, human demand, additional residents, visitors, but also other demands. So things like higher temperatures means more water is evaporating from lakes and ponds. It means that plants are pulling water out of the ground and they're releasing it through their leaves. So you have, all of these different demands on the water supply compounded upon one another. So this is where it's very important to, to start to develop a culture of water conservation that, it does not seem we have the luxury of doing just during the summer, just when we're talking about lawn watering, but really that we want to make that just a daily sort of thing. knowing that conservation before peak demand season can can basically provide more of more buffer, more flexibility in the event that these conditions continue. And then also there's a whole set of recommendations for they being the state, call it communities and municipalities, really it's water suppliers. And on Cape Cod, some of those water suppliers are part of, town divisions or town departments, but some of them are not. They're self-sustaining entities. And so that's where this can get a little complicated. Again, some of those recommendations are immediate things that can be done. Short and medium term steps, also looking at things like, water rate studies and or changing water rates. Our great recommendations we've heard through last year's drought grant, they can be really challenging and time consuming, both in terms of kind of the math behind doing water rates and then the process of setting them. One thing that I did want to highlight is, emergency interconnections for water supply. So that's a recommendation that we've been trying to put out there as ways that water suppliers can, develop interconnects with their neighbors as a much faster way of sort of adding in redundancy as compared to developing new water supplies. And that's, development of new water supplies, something I'll get into in subsequent slides as well. I think there's also an opportunity here. Several of these recommendations talk about kind of communication and outreach and educating customers about, how their behavior at the tap connects to, this aquifer, which is mostly sight unseen. It's under the ground. You just, may not think about where the water is coming from. You open the faucet and the water comes out. And so some basic education about connecting that behavior to the resource that's below us. I think that's an opportunity, certainly for the water suppliers, but especially for at the regional level, at the county level, for us to get some of that information and education out, because the landscape is so different in terms of the water suppliers, their size, their priority, whether they have restrictions required through their Water Management Act permits. It makes for a very patchwork landscape right now. And so uniform messaging, I think, is really important for, starting to plant the seeds of behavior change. And so to get into that, the commission has already started in responding to some of the questions and information that is out in the public about the aquifer in general, about water supplies, about some of these challenges as they relate to drought. We've put together some informational, one-pagers that are slightly more than one page, but really looking to, one, help kind of foster a general understanding of what is groundwater, what is the aquifer, how are they different, where does your drinking water come from, and also to put some numbers to help contextualize questions about, are we draining the aquifer, how much water is there? I think it's really hard to wrap your head around what some of these numbers mean, that 450 million gallons of water enter the aquifer daily. And that's, of course, right, if it's dry right now, they're not entering today, but that's sort of averaged out over a year with all of the precipitation. And of that water that, that every year is recharging through precipitation, most of it is basically flowing out to the coastal embayments, right? And a lot of us who have worked through the coastal nutrient management may have a good sense of that if you've had to try and study the watersheds and figure out, why the planning works in that way. We may know that, but I think what's important to understand is, with all of the public water supplies, we're currently withdrawing less than 10% of that annual recharge. So that's the amount of water going back into the aquifer each year from precipitation. And that's about 11 billion gallons based on the currently permitted and registered amounts in for all of the public water supplies on Cape Cod. But this is very clearly, it's not a black and white issue. It is nuanced, which is not to say that, hey, you know, we have lots of water, no problem. Like we can waste it, we can use it however we want and whenever we want. And this is where it is, you know, where some of the nuance in the messaging is really important, which is to say that the 11 billion gallons that are being pumped each year by public water suppliers is a relatively small percentage of overall recharge. It's also, you know, they're not operating at 100% capacity. So there is still additional capacity within those already existing water supplies, permitted volumes, et cetera. But again, like all of these numbers I've been putting out, you know, these are annual withdrawals that I'm talking about here. But water supplies also have either physical limitations, which is, you know, given the geology around a well, you can only pump a certain amount of water, you know, or a certain flow rate. There are also limits placed on individual wells through the Water Management Act. And so these are where, even though there may be plenty of water, getting it when you want and in the amount you want, when we think about peak summer season, and we think about some of these conditions on the right. So if you start to layer on, perhaps there is an ongoing drought, perhaps there's a need for fire response, perhaps there is a problem with equipment, a well pump, there's a need to take a well offline to install treatment. All of those things, you know, can eat into that additional flexibility. And so that's where it's really critical to, just because we have additional capacity to pump water, not to use it frivolously. So that's all been kind of Cape-wide, but because you all are in Eastham today, and because there's been additional, you know, certainly additional interest on the Outer Cape about this water supply question, I wanted to very briefly zoom in. So what we're showing here on the left is kind of a conceptual model of what the, you know, what the aquifer or the groundwater lenses look like. On the left, that's kind of a mid-Cape look at it. What's important to take from here is that from the top of the water table, sort of straight down, it's all fresh water until you hit bedrock, typically hundreds of feet, kind of below the land surface. The way that the groundwater flows sort of from the top of the lens out to the coasts, that's all the same when you move to the Outer Cape. But what's a little different is that the bedrock is significantly deeper on the Outer Cape. And so you don't actually have fresh water all the way down to that bedrock layer. The freshwater lens is actually, you know, floating in a sense on more dense salt water. Also, you know, anyone who's seen kind of an aerial photo of the Cape or knows the geography knows that just the landform is narrower. So when we talk about these Outer Cape lenses, they are both not as thick or as deep because they have that underlying saline groundwater layer. And then they're also not as wide just because they follow the land. So it means that, you know, some of the volumes we're talking about in those lenses are smaller. And just a quick cheat sheet, you know, before the pop quiz, because I'm going to show information about these individual lenses. So just as a reminder, town of Eastham is within the Nauset lens. The Chequesset lens is primarily the town of Wellfleet. Pamet lens is mostly the town of Truro. And then the Pilgrim lens is in Provincetown. So as we switch to, this graphic, what's important to look at here, again, this is kind of a similar breakdown to what I previously showed, which is for each of these lenses, how much recharge do they get, annually, or here it's shown daily, and then where does that water flow to? I will point out that this information is from a 2005 USGS report. So, astute listeners and watchers will say, hey, what about Eastham's public water supply? It is not reflected in here because it didn't exist then. I did look up the volume of water that they're permitted to withdraw. It's about 2% of what's shown here in the Nauset lens. So just to give everyone a sense of, for the Outer Cape, about 2% of the Nauset lens goes to public water supplies, 7% of the Pamet lens, those being the wells in Truro that serve the Provincetown Water Department. And overall, for all 4 of those Outer Cape lenses, it is well under 10%, much like the rest of the Cape, likely, much less than 5%. So again, kind of a similar situation in terms of the overall magnitude of water supply withdrawals on the Lower Cape to the Upper and Mid Cape as well, but just wanted to make sure that we were able to zoom in and look at things in a Lower Cape specific way. And so that's going to take me to my final slide here. And I think this does a really good job of trying to take a complicated question and boil it down into a succinct answer, which is both, the overall volume of water is generally not the issue, but accessing that water is in the way that we want at the time that we want. And that in thinking about doing that and thinking about, water supplies which exist as, as individual entities, but thinking about just sort of regional water supply capacity, it's not just about meeting current demand. It's really about future proofing, about thinking about additional demands, thinking about, changing conditions, and that we may not want to be relying on using 100% of our capacity for extended periods. That building redundancy into the system will both, help maintain operational flexibility under challenging conditions, as well as then make supplies better able to meet those future needs. And again, one of the big questions is like, can we build our way out of this, right? Like if there's lots of water, can we just install more wells and pump more water? And that's, it's a complicated question. So in updated mapping, the amount of land that could support future water supplies is less than 10% or less than 11% of land on Cape Cod. The process for exploration, development of new water supplies is not a fast one. It takes multiple years. And so when we think about kind of immediate and short-term solutions, adding new wells doesn't just fit into those kinds of timelines. So that's why it's, all of these conservation measures and education are so critical to, efficiently use the capacity that we currently have, and to basically provide some time so that we can be, effective with planning for additional water supplies to meet either future demands or to just provide more flexibility to meet current demands.
That's great. Tim, thank you very much. Commissioner, any questions? Commissioner Bergstrom.
Yeah, this is probably outside of housing, one of the biggest issues on the minds of Cape Coders is the water supply and the quality of the water that we drink. I know you have to consider development patterns when we talk about our future ability to provide water to people, to houses and to businesses. You talk about extending the infrastructure, which is expensive, but not all water is exactly the same. And it's all safe to drink, but some of them is discolored. Some of it may have elements in it to make it less palatable, which means you have to put on, more treatment on each one. So it could be an expensive enterprise in the future. The other thing is development patterns as far as short-term rentals. I think we have to look at what the effects of things like short-term rentals do. Does that produce an exponential increase in water use for those properties? And if so, what are we gonna do about that? I think the quality of water that we drink, when I first came to the Cape 50 years ago, I thought the water was great, and I still do, still think that way, especially if it's not, treated anyway, but, I think this issue that you bring up and the decisions we have to make are gonna be important going forward, because we have to know that we have enough water. We have to know that the water that we drink is safe and not contaminated.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure that the infrastructure, that we can afford to expand the infrastructure and to accommodate, potential future development. But
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Lyons, did you have any comments or questions?
No, I mean, I just think that we have to really recognize that there's more of us living here year-round than there used to be. And part of the health of those ponds were people left. You know, we came for a temporary period in the summer and we left, and they were able to recharge and heal as we healed while we were here. And, I know that this all goes into housing, and that's what we're talking about here today, but we really have to be mindful of what is this resource, not just for us, but for future people. I mean, are we gonna be the ones that say this is where it ends and we're gonna make this a different place, or are we going to keep this and be good stewards? So as far as the summer consumption, I think that there's part of our education to visitors is to have something in each home that's rented, to tell people, this is, if you love it here, help us extend its life, so to speak, and be conscious of these things. I'll never forget somebody in an elevator, and this was in Boston, but they obviously paid for their water, and he was coming, he's getting on the elevator, and he says to his wife, oh God, now I can take a shower as long as I'm gonna take a 4-hour shower. And I'm like, don't do that just because I'm like, that's not the way to think.
Right.
But that's how people will be, because they're paying money to go on vacation. They want to do what they don't normally do.
Right.
So we have to really be very conscious of educating people who visit here, not just about the water, but the land and the beaches and the dunes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you. And
Excellent, Tim. Thank you.
yeah, Tim, thanks for the presentation. And I'm glad that the commission, I'll come to the audience in a moment. I'm glad to see the commission really spending more time and energy on this. I think we as a county, this is one of the things that we're gonna need more discussion about. But I believe we need to do more to support our towns in terms of water conservation education.
Mhm.
The droughts themselves have been challenging in some communities. There's some communities where there are water restrictions in place, but you would never know it. All right, you drive by certain buildings and you'd see the sprinkler system on. You'd be seeing all sorts of uses and activities that are inconsistent with town bylaws and so forth. So I think we've got to figure out a way as a county to collaborate with our communities to do more water conservation, water aquifer awareness, but also the importance of getting home the message about the importance of conservation. And I come to this conclusion just based on my years of experience with working with communities that have been dealing with groundwater contamination impacting water supplies. When I worked in Provincetown in the manager's office, we had 3 major wells. One was threatened with groundwater contamination from a gasoline spill. It had to get shut down until it was remediated. The other 2 wells were overpumped and had to deal with saltwater intrusion. And so now, what the sodium levels are in those water supplies, I don't want to venture to say, but nonetheless, what happens is yes, you can have the volume, but particularly on the outer Cape, when you have the freshwater lens sitting above all the salt water,
Mhm.
is that it's very easy to engage and impact the water supply by drawing in the saline water. The hydrologists call it saltwater intrusion. And so, in the Pamet lens, that's been an issue. That's been a problem historically, because Provincetown can't use the water in the Pilgrim lens because that water is totally undrinkable. So it relies on being able, by statute, to tap into Truro water. If there's going to be this is what worries me about water supply issues on the outer Cape. Is because there's not as much redundancy on water supply as there is on the upper Cape and in the mid Cape. This is where it's a bit challenging. If you get an accident or two or a problem or two, the idea of telling folks in Provincetown and Truro that they're gonna get their water from the Nauset lens, maybe we need to build an interconnect to Nauset. I'm not sure how well that's gonna go over in the town of Eastham.
Right.
All right? And in order to do that, you need legislative permission to do it. So the interconnects, might be easier in other parts of the Cape, but all of this stuff becomes incredibly challenging out here, which is where I believe this is, if there's an area of the Cape where we, as the county and the county commissioners, need to be heavily engaged in working with our towns on water conservation and and the education part of it, and be aggressive about it, it's out here. Because there's not much room for error out here. And so, and you're not gonna identify a lot of other places out here where you can draw or develop wells. Because a lot of work has already been done on that, and there's not a large number of sites out here for future water supplies. So this I believe is one of the, as Commissioner Bergstrom has said, this is one of our biggest challenges out here. And I think it's an initiative that we have to work on collaboratively with Christie and Tim and the commission staff
In the towns.
with in the towns and find ways that we can collaborate and create. It may not be, it may be an intergovernmental regional service, right? Like we're doing on housing and some other areas, but we've got to figure out a way to work together on this because we need to do more. And it relates to the big picture as well in terms of climate change. Commissioner, real quick.
I'm just gonna say, as Mark brings up, there's two issues here, which is the quantity of water that we have available to us, and also the quality of the water. And Tim has covered pretty much the issues regarding the quantity of water. As far as the quality of water, I think it's a good opportunity for us to point out that we directed several $1 million of ARPA funds toward our lab. And because of that, if you have any questions about the water you're drinking when you turn on the tap, you send a sample to our lab and they will tell you what's in it down to almost non-detect levels. Because, there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation out there about, well, is it water safe to drink, what's in it, and so on. So, we want people to have confidence in the water that they drink. This board has made the investment in our lab to make sure that happens. And I just encourage anyone who has any questions about it. It may not taste good, but it may still be safe,
All right.
You should be able to find that.
I'm gonna ask, Jerry, did you want to comment on any of this or anybody else in the audience? But I'm gonna start with the local officials first.
Water is important here.
I know it
one of
is.
the things
You
that
spent a
we-
lot of money to access
Costs a
it.
lot of money. One of the things we have to worry about, we have maybe only 50% of the homes are hooked up to our water. So we need, from our perspective, we
Right.
try to encourage more. We need to have that excess capacity to be able to go. We do have an agreement with parts of South Wellfleet, but we had to limit the amount of water they can take daily in our agreement.
So you're providing your lens is providing water to the
Some water up
Wellfleet
to,
folks?
where
Well,
the,
that's good to know.
where the movie theaters are in that area, and we're probably where Maurice's campground when they work on that. But there's a limit that we have put on how much they can draw.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I mean, Truro's in a bind. Really?
thank you. And I'm gonna go, Mary, did you have something?
I did, but someone else said.
No, I'm gonna go town officials first and then I'm gonna go to the audience at large.
I have a question and a comment. The question I have is especially as you describe the Provincetown situation. Has the Cape ever looked at desalinization plants as
Yes,
an
it
alternative
has.
for?
When the town of Provincetown was in the midst of the water supply crisis back in the late 70s, again, I'm showing my age here.
Yeah.
I mean, the water contamination problem impacted, it was at a gasoline station in Truro.
Mhm.
All right, next to the South Hollow well field, which is across the street. Talk about bad placement for a gasoline station.
Chips on it.
So that was in 1978. In order to access water within the Cape Cod National Seashore, because you have to understand, the limitations that you have out here are that most of the property is in the boundaries of the national park. Right? The national park does not allow water supply withdrawal. All right, so talk about limitations on sites. So the park is not gonna be where you're gonna be developing new wells. You're gonna have to find ways to develop those water supplies someplace else. Now, in this case, Provincetown had to, in order to access that water on an emergency basis, that's allowed by law, by statute, federal statute. Provincetown had to develop a long-range plan, and in order to meet their long-range needs, they had to look at where the other supplies were that could be developed for the purposes of supplying Provincetown residents. The studies done showed that they could, without dealing with the politics, of course, go to the Checosset Neck, the Checosset lens in Wellfleet, or there were a few other areas available for water supply development in the Pamet lens. And again, the Cape Cod National Seashore takes out most of the land area available, or that would be considered worthwhile for developing because of the prohibitions there. So we looked at desalinization and found it incredibly expensive. So yes, it's been looked at. Now, this was the last time a study was done. I don't know if the commission is done. I'm gonna put Christie on the spot in a moment, but when Provincetown looked at it, it was seen as prohibitively expensive for one municipality, 3,500 people year round, 50,000 in the summer.
It might be a regional option.
Well, we may want to take a look at that. I don't think you're gonna need to get into that discussion for the Mid Cape and the Upper Cape. I think it's a different situation there. The Lower Cape is a very, very unique situation. Christie, are you aware of any desalinization water supply studies that have been done lately?
Not as of recent, but I do think that that is something that should be at least reviewed as part of larger aquifer protection planning. So something that I think should be considered as.
Yeah. So as you can see, Mary, we're
Sure.
the commission we've been spending a lot of time having conversations about doing more and helping better understand what our limitations are and how the drought is impacting what's going on. So I think this becomes a conversation that we have in terms of what more studies we pursue,
Yeah.
but we should definitely put that on the table.
Israel and the whole Middle East over the last 20 years has just built these out. So I wonder whether the economies, the efficiency, and it's just a comment.
Well, they don't have any other options. So yeah.
And that's really what the crux of that is.
Here's my one comment, and
Go ahead.
I'll tie in the climate change. When I went to that community meeting, one of the things that got the biggest applause, and I don't know if this is possible, the notion of embracing on the Cape in general, the Cape Cod lawn. No
Mhm.
irrigation systems, no fertilizers.
Right.
We're gonna live with some brown grass in the middle of the
There you go.
summer, but we're gonna have a Cape Cod lawn. And whether that's an education campaign, a marketing campaign, or
Aesthetics
legislation, or regulatory change, that could make a major impact on a lot of environmental issues. And that was the thing that everyone applauded in the community.
Really, got a standing O, huh?
It was-
That's
it was- It was positive. So
That's good.
I just.
So Christie's taking notes. We're gonna put that on our next effort in the audience. Yes, sir.
Eric,
Eric Schwab from Hyannis. So you know, we pay 89 cents a gallon for drinking water. Drive to Warren to buy it at market value.
so much fun.
Cape Cod law, which I love dearly. The concern that we have in Mid Cape, and the concern that I'm hearing here, is that the zoning changes being pursued by the Cape Cod Commission are creating conditions which are challenging our water supply. Specifically, the contract with Eastern Port Maurices and some of the activity that's being considered on Walsh property. So we would like to know Cape Cod Commission, when they consider passing on considerations about regional impact, do they take into account the water? Do they consider that we could have a 5-10 year drought some time?
Mhm. So,
And have a lot of high density housing where Easton's gonna turn off the plug.
yeah,
And is that part of their calculus?
so that's a question directed to the chair. I'm gonna ask Christie if you'd like to respond to that.
Sure, yes, absolutely. So projects that are reviewed by our board, so those projects that trigger commission review thresholds that are reviewed as developments of regional impact, are reviewed pursuant to our regional policy plan and have to adhere to goals and objectives within that policy plan that are geared towards water resources. So certainly, many of those considerations are looked at as we review those plans and make those recommendations to our board and make the ultimate decisions. But certainly water resources is one of those critical components of the review process.
Yeah, I think one of the things that do you have a follow-up? Real quick.
So can you mention a single ERI that you've ever declined because of water conditions?
I probably wouldn't venture to just go on a
Yeah,
limb at
this
the
one,
moment.
right,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
certainly-
We could, what I'd like to do is we could bring this up as an agenda topic at a future meeting to kind of get into this a little bit. If you want to do me a favor and sort of outline some of the questions that you think are worth our delving into that relate to this. No, I think it's a legitimate question. I think the constraints on water supply are more prominent, particularly out in this part of the Cape. I think if there are major developments that would be promoted out here, some of the the concerns that I hear in the Mid-Cape, if you take some of those issues regarding housing development and then apply them out here, people out here are much more nervous and much more concerned. And because there's not just the space, but also the water supply. Again, I mentioned the limitations are more, there's more of an awareness out here. And I think they become factors in the conversation. Yes, sir.
I hear a lot of talk today about conserving water. To me, it's just common sense. As you build more housing on Cape Cod under the disguise of the 40B affordable housing program, you're gonna exaggerate this problem. You're gonna be using more water with more housing. It's just common sense. You don't need committees, you don't need studies and all of that. More houses, you use more water. In regards to protecting the aquifer, which I've been hearing, which I am completely in favor of, obviously. The offshore wind farm wants to put their substation right over the sole source aquifer of Cape Cod with 100,000 gallons of highly toxic fluid. And if that fluid gets into the aquifer, it's over for Cape Cod.
I appreciate that.
It's
Thank you.
over.
Thank you.
As far as climate change, I don't know if anybody's been to the National Seashore over here. It's a great facility. They did a great
Yeah.
documentary on the sands of time.
Yes.
Seeing that.
Yeah.
For the last 20,000 years, long before the invention of the internal combustion engine, 20,000 years, the Cape has been shifting and changing with the climate. You mentioned yourself, Mr. Forrest. You can't stop Mother Nature.
Right.
And that's the way it is. You
That
can ban this, you can ban that.
Mhm.
Cape Cod lawns, good idea. Okay, I got a lawn, I like to keep it green if I had to. I don't have to, it's less work for me.
Yeah.
I'm all for that too.
Yeah,
But,
I appreciate your comments.
yeah,
sir.
you
Thank-
really gotta watch the development. My personal feeling is just stop. You're destroying Cape Cod, just stop. The affordable housing, you build 100 units, you get 10 affordable.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, we're not in that conversation, but we get there.
Time out, everybody. We're running out of time. I've got 10 minutes to 12 and we've got a rest of our
Mark,
agenda to go through.
Mark,
But-
I'm gonna speak.
Okay.
Hang on,
He just wants to-
hang on a second. I'm-
Okay,
I appreciate your comments. If you want to submit anything in writing
Sure.
in addition to what you've
no,
commented on
I
today,
agree.
can I just
Yeah.
be uninterrupted for a moment so I can engage in this constituent?
Go right ahead.
Yep, if you have other comments that you'd like to submit to us, we're all ears, okay? So feel free to expand and add any other commentary, all right? So I'm gonna end the conversation. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bergstrom?
Yeah, just, the talk about desalinization plants anticipates there's gonna be some point where we're gonna have to fall back on that. And that's totally unacceptable. I mean, with two threats. One is the threat of further water use. The other threat is the fact that climate change may reduce the water that we have now. Right? Nothing we can do about the second one. First one, we can do something about. There's always going to be more development. How much and what pace? That's something that we can determine. But as we find that there's going to be some inevitable development, we can make accommodations to see that water use through conservation is reduced. So the amount of water that we use now, or we can set a limit in the future, 10 or 20% increase, and we could determine that we're not going to go beyond that in total water use by enacting regulations and by enacting restrictions that would keep us underneath that amount. So yes, I know we're not gonna put a pipe out into the into Nantucket Sound or the ocean and start desalinating them. We have to use conservation is absolutely number one.
I don't think, with all due respect, I don't think Mary's suggesting that we go that way. She's just trying to help us make sure that
I understand that.
we understand what the cost and the implications are. That's all she's asking for. It's a legitimate question. It should be looked at. People should know what it would cost if we need to go in that
That
direction.
would change it.
That's all she's suggesting. Commissioner Lyons, do you have any final comments?
No, I
before
do
we-
not. I know that we have time is of the essence,
Yeah.
so we'll keep that for another time.
So do we have any other questions for Christie? Because she has to leave to
Nope.
another appointment.
She's gotta go.
Okay.
Thank
Christie,
you.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And all your staff.
Yes.
It's been a great, thank you, Tim. Great presentation.
And for the folks that are in the audience, the next part of our agenda is relatively boring and routine,
Right,
but you're
it's
certainly
just-
welcome
The rest
to
of our meeting-
stay. Okay?
Yes, we can see.
Very good. So we're gonna move on to the next item on our agenda, which is authorizing the execution of the closing documents related to the financing agreement number CWT 25-04 for the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust interim loan in the amount not to exceed $1,140,489. And I'm gonna ask if now, we've taken this matter up before, and so this is just a subsequent action to finalize approval of the financing of this. Does anybody have any questions for Carol Capola before we move on this one?
I do not.
Okay, so Carol, you're off the hook. Thanks for hanging around. Could I have a motion, please?
So, I'm happy to make this motion.
Go right
Mr.
ahead,
Chair,
Commissioner
and do I read all of
The
this?
whole thing. For the purposes
All right,
of,
good thing everybody left because they didn't want to hear all of this. All right, I move that the county shall issue a bond or bonds in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $11 million of the bonds pursuant to chapter 163 of the Acts of 1988 as amended, chapter 29C of the general laws and ordinance number 21-024-01 adopted by a vote of the Assembly of Delegates on May 1st, 2024, and ordinance number 23-06 adopted by the Assembly of Delegates on February 15th, 2023, for planning or construction of sewers or other water pollution control abatement infrastructure, otherwise known as the project. Number two, the terms of the financing agreement between the county and the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, referred to as the trust, and the financing agreement and the project regulatory agreement between the county and the Department of Environmental Protection of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, DEP, the project regulatory agreement, each relating to the notes and bonds are hereby approved. Three, in anticipation of the issuance of the bonds, the county director of finance or treasurer is authorized to issue an interim loan notes called the notes, from time to time in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $11 million. That each bond or note shall be issued as a single registered security and sold to the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust at the price determined pursuant to the financing agreement. That the county director of finance is authorized to determine the date, the form, and maximum interest rate and principal maturities of each bond or note, and to execute a financing agreement with the trust with respect to the sale of the bonds and notes. Such date, form, and maturities, and the specific interest rate or rates of the bonds and notes to be approved by a majority of the board and the county director of finance and evidenced by their execution of bonds or notes. That the certificates, number 6, the certificates or documents relating to each bond and note, collectively the documents, may be executed in several counterparts, each of which shall be regarded as an original and all of which constitute one and the same document. Delivery of an executed counterpart of a signature page to a document by electronic email in a PDF file or other electronic transmission shall be as effective as delivery of a mutually executed counterpart signature page to such document. and electronic signatures of any of the documents shall be deemed original signatures for the purposes of the documents and all matters relating thereto having the same legal effect as the original signatures. Almost done. Number 7, all of the action taken to date by the county and its officers and agents to carry out the project and its financing include the execution of any loan, commitment, or agreement by the county director of finance treasurer are hereby ratified, approved, and confirmed. And number 8, that the county director of finance treasurer and other appropriate county officials are hereby authorized to take any and all actions necessary or convenient to carry out the provisions of this vote, including execution and delivery of the financing agreement and the project regulatory agreement relating to the project. Done.
Thank you. That's the motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm just gonna ask staff, is there anything here that we need to
Is
adjust or tweak? It's all accurate. Everything is all set. Carol? Okay,
Right.
very good. So we have a motion
Okay.
and a second. Is there any more discussion on this?
No.
Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom,
Aye.
Commissioner Forrest votes aye. It's unanimous. Agenda item number D. This relates to a proposed ordinance regarding the transfer of a remaining balance in our ARPA funds. And I'm gonna ask Commissioner Lyons if she'd like to make a motion.
Sure, I moved to, so this is about, moving funds from the towns and the small, medium grants tranches to the opera administrative budget. I moved to introduce proposed ordinance 26 to be named transfer remaining balances of $7.09 of the American Rescue Plan Act grant funds by moving them from the towns and small to medium grant tranches to the opera administration budget to ensure the expenditure of these funds.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Yeah, second.
Okay, this is gonna require a roll call vote. Commissioner Bergstrom,
Bergstrom votes aye.
Commissioner Lyons,
Lions votes aye.
and Commissioner Forrest votes aye.
So that is what's left of the opera
Approved
funds.
unanimously. Well,
We spent
it's-
right up to $7.09.
we're not quite there yet. Item number 7, new business. Is there any other new business to come before the Board of Commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And I'm gonna ask Commissioner Bergstrom to, since the number of abstentions involving myself and Commissioner Lyons, I'm gonna ask Commissioner Bergstrom to do the honors of reading through each of the motions here, since you're unaffected.
I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda items 8A as listed on the March 25th, 2026 meeting agenda for use by the town of Yarmouth.
I second.
Okay, and moved and seconded. A roll call, Commissioner Lyons
Lions votes aye.
Commissioner Forrest abstains.
and Commissioner Bergstrom votes aye. Okay?
Next
Now,
item.
the next item, excuse me, I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda item 8A. This is the same exactly one that we just did.
Right, because we're both on it.
But it's, read the rest of the
Okay,
line.
I'll move. I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda item 8A is listed on the March 25th, 2026 meeting agenda for use by the town of Wellfleet.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded, Commissioner Forrest
Votes aye.
and Commissioner Bergstrom votes aye.
And Commissioner Lyons abstains.
There you go. Next one.
I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda item 8A is listed on March 25th, 2026 meeting agenda for use by the towns of Barnstable, Bourne, Brewster, Chatham, Dennis, Falmouth, Orleans, and Sandwich.
I second.
Okay,
Roll call vote.
roll call vote, Commissioner Lyons.
Aye.
Commissioner
Bergstrom
Forrest?
votes aye.
And Commissioner Forrest can vote aye. And will vote aye.
We will.
Mm-hmm. Next one.
Next
You're
one,
on a roll,
We're moving
Commissioner.
right along. I
Yeah.
move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda item 8B as listed on the March 25th, 26 meeting agenda.
Second.
Go ahead.
Okay, I moved to seconded. I'll call for roll call vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Lions votes aye.
Bergstrom votes aye.
And Forrest abstains.
Okay. Second, next, I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda item AC as listed on the March 25th, 2026 meeting agenda.
And I will second that.
Okay, been moved and seconded, Commissioner Forrest
Votes aye.
and Commissioner Bergson votes aye.
And Commissioner Lyons abstains.
Okay. I move to approve Commissioner's agenda, consent agenda item 8D as listed on the March 25th, 2026 meeting agenda. Sheila, you got to,
Oh, second.
okay, I'll call for a vote. Commissioner Lyons,
Aye.
Commissioner Bergstrom votes aye.
And Commissioner Forrest abstains.
Okay. Next, I move to approve Commissioner's consent agenda items 8E through 8AA as listed on the March 25th, 26 meeting agenda.
Second.
Okay, I also vote, I will
We can,
call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye, or Commissioner Lyons
Lyons votes aye.
and
Forrest votes aye.
and Bergstrom votes aye.
So that is all because
Oh.
of
Yeah.
open meeting law.
Yeah. Now, let me just explain for the folks in the audience that had to sit through all this, what it is we voted on, just so that you know.
Right.
The first set of motions dealt with, awarding a bid for construction work and construction materials, basically, that affect all our towns. But since I'm a select board member in the town of Yarmouth, any of the activities that that involve providing a benefit or some impact to the town of Yarmouth, I will abstain from voting on. And that's the same for Commissioner Lyons, since she's on the select board in the town of Wellfleet. So if there's anything that involves the town of Wellfleet, she will abstain from voting on it. So we had to award a contract, or award a bid rather, for roadway and construction items. And then on that, then following that, there was road resurfacing contracts. Now, again, to explain this, the county has a region-wide procurement service. So we go out to bid for materials and involving construction, materials involving road resurfacing contracts. And what the county does is it tries to get the lowest and best possible bid for the local community. And so if we have prices for each of the towns, again, I will abstain from voting on any acceptance of a bid that might involve the town of Yarmouth. Commissioner Lyons will do the same
Right.
for Wellfleet. So
And that's
these,
to save everybody money up in the state and ethics and us having to get lawyers to
Yeah.
address things.
and then the last area is that there are dredging contracts. So we approved a number of dredging agreements for various towns. One involves Bass River, and because that might implicate the town of Yarmouth, since Yarmouth utilizes Bass River, I abstain from voting for that. And Commissioner Lyons would do the same for any dredging involving Eastham,
So just to let you know, I've
not
requested,
Eastham, excuse me. Well,
when we go, and you may be interested in this meeting, when we come to Wellfleet, I did ask for procurement to be on the agenda and talk about our procurement service and how it might help the Arctic town. But anyway, there you go, Jerry.
so there you go. And also in the consent agenda is we authorized a letter of support to the National Seashore for a relocation project involving the Nauset Light Beach Road. They're working on an exchange. Under the law, they need to ask us for an endorsement, so we endorsed that. So just, Jerry, so that you're aware of that. So we also endorsed a similar seashore letter for another project in a neighboring town. So that was important. We also needed to basically acknowledge the receipt, the notice from the Mass Department of Transportation for their land acquisition work associated with the new Sagamore Bridge. So they're doing a lot of land acquisition. By law, they have to notify us.
Mhm.
And in order for us to approve of the notification, we had all these acknowledgements of a receipt for all of these individual parcels, and each one needs to be spelled out. So we spared everyone the time involved in going through each of the parcels. So we put it on the consent agenda, which is, again, for anybody that's interested, you can go to our website, look at our agenda as it was posted, and you can see all of the parcels. And then finally, what we did was we also approved a number of appointments to the Health and Human Services Advisory Council. So these are individuals that represent the towns. They're often nominated by the towns.
And if I,
And go ahead.
just want to add that, for all those dog lovers out there, and there are many, and especially those who love dachshunds, there is a Cape Cod Doxy Day, and that is held, on September 26th, 2026 at the Barnstable County Complex grounds. So you can bring your little doggy and meet other dachshunds and maybe have more dachshunds
There you
if
go.
they fall in love.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. I went to the Doxy Day once. I had a dachshund since
Oh, you did?
a doggy reward. And there were probably, dozens of dachshunds there, and finally it was time to leave, so I picked up my dachshund and wandered off with them. Turns out it was the wrong dog. The poor dog was looking at me like, what are you doing?
Well, they
And a
kinda look
quick
alike.
Exchange.
Great, very good.
That's a sad, poor dog.
So,
Um,
I'm gonna move on to the next item on our
Yeah.
agenda. To move down, I'm gonna go to the approval of the meeting minutes.
Yes.
And, could I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the revised February 11th, 2026 regular meeting minutes as drafted.
Okay, roll call vote. Forrest votes aye.
Bergson votes aye.
And Lyons votes aye.
Very good. Do I have another motion?
Yes, I move to approve the March 4th, 2026 regular meeting minutes as drafted.
Forrest votes aye.
Bergson votes aye.
And Lyons votes aye.
Very good. Do we have any other commissioner reports?
Well, I just did want to
Commissioner
mention, I did go to, the Mass Works, retreat. And, it is fascinating, the work they're doing in the schools, the work they're doing, as far as teaching skills. We don't get that here as much as you are aware of it in Hyannis. There is a, career center there. There's, education classes that go on in conjunction with, Cape Cod Community College. There's job placement, there's English language, there's a lot of things they're helping people to be able to secure work. And I think I'd like to have them come to our meeting and talk about one of our meetings in the future, to talk about where they're going, what they're doing, but they are working a lot with the tech schools. And I do think that as municipalities and a county, we could be helpful in creating curriculums that would be helpful to all of us. So, and to keep our young people here. One of the cries is everybody has to leave because there's no jobs. There are jobs. It's just these, I'm not sure if everybody's being directed to them. So it was really a very interesting thing. And I'll just leave it at that.
Very good.
One more time.
Thank you. Commissioner Bergstrom, any commissioner?
No, I don't have anything right now.
Okay. Upcoming business, this is where we look at the upcoming agendas.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for the county administrator, I think we should add the Mass Works to as an agenda topic for a future meeting.
Future. Mass hires,
Mass hires.
mass
Yep.
hires.
Yeah.
But they're under it's mass hire, and it's the,
Okay,
once was the Cape Cod, what was it? Workforce development. Yes,
Great.
thank you.
that's good. How do we look for our next meeting?
You look busy, for your next meeting. You've got, several presentations, one or two of which we could rearrange a little bit, but, we'd like to get that done. And you've got, county business
Mhm.
that we want to save for our.
Do you think we need to start earlier on that day?
I think you'll be all right. We have some flexibility in presentations,
Okay,
so we can talk about that.
okay. Might we need some nutrition or nourishments brought in at certain points?
Always.
Good.
Commissioner,
Yeah.
I requested we discuss Governor Healy's Executive Order 650, which concerns the ban on ice on state property and
Mm-hmm.
state facilities. So I'd like to add that to.
Yeah, let's make sure that that's on the agenda.
Yeah,
think
I
we-
absolutely
let's
agree.
Put it on the eighth.
And first two.
That request came into us, what, a month ago?
The 7th of March.
Yeah, okay, so good, we've got that on there. That's great. Any other items that you'd like to bring up? We've got your, and for Wednesday, the 22nd, we're gonna be in Wellfleet.
Hmm.
Any
Yeah.
special topics?
Oh, yeah, I already went over it with the administrator.
That's good.
Well, you'll be surprised. No, one of them is the procurement and,
Okay.
what else did I gave you, we talked about a few things there.
We did, seasonal, little update on seasonal communities, perhaps,
Mhm.
update on our composting initiative.
Yep. Cause that came up at a recycle meeting.
Potential, discussion or presentation about, IA systems
Mhm.
and the work the county's doing with IA systems, in order to reduce nitrogen discharge.
So we might want to invite Brian out there, Carrie out there,
Yes.
and Jennifer.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, why don't we,
She'd come out.
yeah, we can get her out of,
Day and the other
get her
day,
out on the
it'll be
road
good weather.
show. Sounds good.
That's enticing to everybody. Is it Linda? Yeah, you. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to put you, I recognize your face, but I can't do it.
Any other, agenda items that we should talk about, commissioners? Okay, then hearing none, we're gonna move on to the next item, which is
Welcome, if we don't get out of here.
county administrator reports.
Just have a couple of items, just let you know that the assembly has taken up, the commissioner's budget. Obviously, different components go to different committees. That process kicked off earlier in the week and, continues tonight and, tomorrow. And then next week as well. So that is moving along, well. Next meeting or the meeting after, I'll probably come to you with a proposal to try to, complete the burn building that we constructed in Yarmouth, as you know. We've been trying to complete that since 2017. So I think we've got a plan in place.
Whenever that's ready, we should invite Beth.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that was really.
Yeah. She'll be
A
thrilled.
stone that she carried around.
She'll be
with
thrilled.
her.
I think the name.
Yeah, we should put it the name, yeah,
Oh, yeah, the Beth Albert Building. There you go. That'll make her happy.
no, she doesn't want to remember it really.
And then the only other thing, just want to let you know that we are, tracking and, beginning compliance with electronic accessibility. Specifically, our website has to be compliant by the end of April. We will probably, nobody is going to meet that date, I can tell you that, but governments our size are required to comply. This year, governments, all the other governments on the Cape are required to comply. Municipal governments are required to comply next year. So, we are going through quite a lot of, research, on what programs to use, what, practices to take. And so I've asked, Senator Kingsley, our communications manager, to, look at potentially being able to offer a service to all the towns, on how to comply. And if it makes sense for us to do a joint procurement for whatever, software we need, then.
Excellent, thank you.
Do that, so, but that's what I have.
Great, because I do know, that must be why we're undergoing, I mean, number one, our website needs a lot of work, but
Yeah.
it is now mandatory that it's more accessible and important
For Wellfleet or for all the towns, it'll be about a year from.
a year from now.
Before we go on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to make, my own commissioner's report. The county administrator and I attended, we were invited to speak at the, Barnstable, Civic Association the other night. We did a County 101 presentation and, we wanted to at least engage in a discussion about, the courthouse and some of the renovations that are being planned there. And, they were very welcoming, very, it was in a very, very enjoyable conversation with them that the both of us had. And the staff, the folks there, several of them were incredibly complimentary about Robin and the service that she provides, to them and to the people of Barnstable County. And it was nice to hear all the accolades going Robin's way. We promised that we would be back to keep in touch with them as the county courthouse improvements progress. They're engaged in that. They have a lot of interest in it. We talked about this before, the need to have community involvement in it. So they appreciated us being there to talk about it. And, I think, they're looking forward to having us back there, particularly Michael. He was the star of the event.
Yeah,
And,
I actually had feedback on that meeting,
Yeah.
that's why I knew you were there.
yeah,
And, I heard only good things, everything you say is true. And I did put a request into Michael yesterday that please don't let that parade, don't start the construction until after the Fourth
Yeah.
of July parade. They do have a big parade. This is the 250th,
Yeah,
and they didn't want Mercy and
no, that,
James Otis to be shrouded in. some
trust me,
sort of-
they were not shy about coming up with.
Oh, I know, I
suggestions,
heard, I heard.
Yeah. So, we have a motion, yes, ma'am.
How helpful Robin has been to Cape Cod Doxy Day over the years. This will be our 18th year. And
That's how I remember you. The Doxy Day.
she's answered every email that I've sent. She's resent, sent some that I lost and really appreciate your help and your support.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah,
To hear.
thanks for sharing that with us. And so before we move to adjourn, I want to thank Jerry. I wanna
Yes.
Thank our
Thank you,
host
Val.
here in the town of Eastham. You've been incredibly accommodating. Anytime you want us back, you know,
Yeah.
we're here, we're ready
Yeah.
to come. But we have a regular rotation, so hopefully we'll continue this.
Yeah.
This is.
If you want to speed up the rotation, come in more often, you're welcome.
Okay, well,
Well,
thank you. It
if,
was
if
very
you,
nice.
if you want to, you can come to our Wellfleet meeting, which will be next month. Yes,
Next month.
yeah, so we'll be moving. We've learned that the Lower Cape likes to be referred to as the Lower Cape, and the Outer Cape wants their own special attention, so.
Absolutely.
So we now have Wellfleet, Truro and Provincetown sort of lumped together in a group, so. In any
And
event,
Eastham.
we'll be there, next month.
Right.
Thank you for your hospitality.
Yes, thank you very much. This was
All
lovely.
right, do I have a motion
And
to
with
adjourn?
that, Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Okay,
At
motion and second, it's 12:20,
12:20.
and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it carries unanimously. The meeting is
Thank you again.
adjourned.
Thank you.